Asian children, boys and girls alike. I mean, you know, it made up a greater proportion of the sales. People felt it was damaging because it was going into all kinds of homes in Beverly Hills and Southampton and in New York and that kind of thing, where it hadn't before. And little white kids were walking around with their asses out, you know, and rapping.
Time Warner now severed their links with gangster rap by dumping Deathrow's distributor, Interscope. But there were no shortage of new backers for the company. Interscope was picked up by Seagram, one of America's top 10 corporations. Seagram was a giant umbrella of interests ranging from the Universal Film Studios to TV production, theme parks, and many of America's leading brands of wine and spirits. Seagram now ventured into music, paying $400 million for Interscope, and along with Interscope came Deathrow Records.
It certainly didn't affect Deathrow. It didn't affect sales or what have you. That was, actually, the whole thing was Time Warner's loss, as far as I'm concerned. Because they certainly, you know, there was no interim they picked up, and I think the next album after we left the Time Warner family did very, very well.
But Deathrow's real problems were only just beginning. They were about to be swallowed up in a feud that would end in the murder of two of rap's superstars and threaten the very foundations of hip-hop. Hip-hop may have begun in New York, but by 1995, West Coast California had stolen the rap market away. The East Coast had been completely eclipsed by LA gangster rap, and the market leader was Deathrow Records. In just 4 years, Deathrow had made a phenomenal $400 million. But Deathrow were about to meet their match on the East Coast in the form of a new label and a new star from New York.
The West Coast was killing us. But along comes a savior of the name of Biggie Smalls and a record company called Bad Boy Records. Came out bragging, showing off their diamonds, their Benzes and all that. And by themselves, a powerhouse little thing out of New York, equal to all that was on the West Coast.
About me, the fake ID, cases in Virginia, body in DC, won't always be, that's what I get for tricking. Came out
They'll set at $1 million.
What you say, what you say,
A former drug dealer from Brooklyn, Biggie Smalls was the first East Coast rapper to match West Coast gangster on its own terms, earning him the nickname of the notorious B.I.G.
What you say,
It was like New York had to be harder than L.A. to get a crown, to get a piece of the pie, to get money. And Biggie came out of that whole crack. We didn't have pimps, players, and hustlers, but we had crack dealers and stick-up kids. So that became the personification, and that made money.
Niggas, grab your dicks if you love hip-hop. Bitches, rub your titties if you love Big Papa. Gotcha, open off the words I say I'm surrounded by criminals, heavy rollers, even the shiesty individuals.
Biggie Smalls would almost single-handedly put New York back on the hip-hop map, achieving a #1 hit and selling 11 million albums.
Shit get drastic, I'm burying your bastards. Big Papa never softening, take it to the church, rob the preacher for the offering.
Biggie's meteoric rise as the savior of East Coast rap was matched by the rise of an even bigger name on the West Coast, Tupac Shakur.
Snoop Dogg in the double R burned out. M.O.B. Big Sugar got the low, bounce and turn, dog pound in the Lex.
Their stardom, based on opposite sides of the country, gave rise to a friendship that would ultimately turn sour.
Picture this, 2 guys. One living on the East Coast, one living on the West Coast. One named Big, one named Tupac. They were actually best friends. They were actually friends. Tupac, one thing that people don't understand, he's the biggest fan ever. Anybody that came out that was hot, that was good, that was just totally dope, a good rapper, Tupac loved them. He was a fan all around. So when Biggie came out, Tupac lost his mind. Oh my God, this guy is so dope. He started going to shows with them. They started performing together. He would bring Biggie on stage with him to open up for him before Biggie was actually large yet. You know, they were friends.
Tupac Shakur was a character full of contradictions. He had been a ballet student in East Coast Baltimore before moving to the West Coast in 1991, where he made his name as an LA rapper.
Tupac was probably one of the most brilliant people that I've met, but also a very troubled individual. I mean, you know, he's Gemini, of course, and I likened him very much to Miles Davis, who was a friend of mine, and I likened the two of them to each other, very much alike, because, you know, Geminis do have sometimes two personalities. There was Tupac Shakur, and then there was Tupac the rapper. Tupac Shakur, who was the actor, a brilliant actor, and then Tupac, who was the rapper.
To live and die in L.A.
But his fame had as much to do with his lifestyle as his music. He epitomised the stereotype of the gangster rapper, living out the words of his songs.
He was a hothead. I'm not gonna sit here and lie. He was a hothead. He wasn't unjustified in his what he would flare up about. When he got in a temper and he got mad about something, it was really genuinely because he felt he had either his honor, his dignity, or some point to defend. You know? He just wasn't the calmest person in sorting something like that out.
Tupac went through a series of scrapes with the law, including a conviction for assault. In November 1994, he faced a rape and sodomy charge.
It's not even about my trial no more. It's just about loud rap music, tattoo-having thugs. It's not even about me no more. It's about, you know, some nightmare that these people having.
She's talking about
After completing this interview following the first day of the rape trial, Tupac went to a New York recording studio to visit his friend, Biggie Smalls. At the door of the studio, he was shot 5 times by a gunman. Despite his injuries, which included the removal of a testicle, he returned to court the next day. He was found guilty of rape and sentenced to 4 years in prison. With Tupac in jail, his latest album, appropriately titled Me Against the World, went straight to the top of the US pop chart, making Tupac the first artist ever to have a #1 record while in jail. Tupac came out of prison after a year and immediately signed for Deathrow Records.
Out on bail, fresh out of jail, California dreaming. Soon as I step on the scene, I'm hearing hoochie screaming, fiending for money and alcohol, the life of a West Side player with cowards die and a strong ball. Only in Cali will we riot, not rally to live and die.
He was on a mental timetable. I mean, he was in the studio the day after he flew here from prison. We had a party, we had a dinner in Westwood, and the next morning he was in the studio. And when he came out, he had a double CD.
Signing Tupac marked the pinnacle of Deathrow's success. His first album made $10 million in its first week, but Tupac's arrival also marked the beginning of a feud that would end in tragedy. While in prison, Tupac had become convinced that the man responsible for his shooting was his old friend, Biggie Smalls. Although Tupac never produced any evidence to support his claim, he did produce a record that made his feelings about Biggie perfectly clear.
Hey, fat boy. First off, touch your chick and the click you claim. West side, when we rock, come equipped with game. You claim to be a player, but I bust your wife. We bust on bad boys, brothers touch for life. Plus Buffy trying to see me weak, hearts I rip. Biggie Smalls and Junior Mafia, some mark-ass trick.
He was very angry, very frustrated. You know, I guess on the B.I.G. thing and the Puffy and the bad boy, you know, he just had all this stuff built up where he just needed to go ahead and let off. So he went in there and, man, you can just hear it and let the lyrics speak for itself because he was one angry individual on that record. So I couldn't control him on that. That was just something he needed to get off his chest. I laid the track and he did his thing, which caused a lot of controversy. I remember that.
You know, grab your Glocks when you see Tupac. Call the cops when you see Tupac. Who shot me, but your punks didn't finish. Now you're about to feel the wrath of a menace. Sucker, I hit him up, yeah. Straight out on the bad boy.
hit 'em up was a tirade of non-stop verbal abuse